Well, I have a lot of questions, obviously, about your business and Elm Dirt, and kind of I want to hear that whole story. But I figured it makes sense to kind of start a little bit before that, a step or two, kind of in your story. Now I know you had a few jobs before that, but even going a little bit earlier into college, it looks like you went to University of Kansas, degree in I think chemical engineering, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. How did you kind of land on that for a degree? Did you have an idea what you want to do with it afterwards? What was kind of like the whole story there?
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. No one's ever asked me about that before. So my parents are actually both chemical engineers that went on to become doctors.
Okay.
So they were obviously fans of chemical engineering. They both went to KU. And I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but as they've both been through and told me, chemical engineering opens the door to a lot of different opportunities, whether you want to become a doctor or an engineer or do something else. And so it's like, well, that's a great starting place. I'll do the same and
Hmm.
see how it works out. So my original plan was to start at KU and be a chemical engineer that goes on to become a doctor, just like my parents. Actually took the MCAT and passed it and was applying to medical schools in my senior year. And I was like, I don't think that's for me. It's a lot more schooling. I'm not quite that into medicine to be able to commit myself to it. And I'd done a lot of research for professors as well while I was there. So one of my most interesting research projects I got to work on was actually making artificial intervertebral discs for your spine,
Well,
and seeding those and working in a biomedical engineering lab there. So a lot of really interesting work that I did at the university. I had a great time there, and then got a job at ExxonMobil immediately afterwards, which was a really great foundation in manufacturing and working for a large corporation as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we're coming right out of school, working for a big company, is yeah. I mean, that's like kind of like a wake up. Is like coming out of school and then all of a sudden being part of a big company. Did you? What was the role? How did you got to kind of get plugged into obviously a very big company like ExxonMobil?
Yeah, yeah. So going just to hear back. So when I took the MCAT, and that was my senior year, I just finished the MCAT, and I was applying to medical school, and I had an instant switch September my senior year. I was like, I don't want to go to medical school. I don't want to be a doctor. I'm going to start taking interviews. I interviewed everywhere. I hadn't really had internships, which is like a big thing going into engineering is you'll need those internships, be able to look good for employers. And it was also 2009. So a year after the stock market crashed, there wasn't a
Hmm.
lot of hiring during that time. And so it was really kind of competitive landscape in those interviews getting out of college. But they took a chance on me, and I started there right after I got out, and I moved to a town called Beaumont, Texas, right outside of Houston, and kind of got thrown into the fire because they
Yep.
were, all right, here you go. You're going to be heading up these major capital projects, and you're going to be the business representative on them, and you're going to be leading the project team. It's like, oh, okay. So I've got no internship experience. I've never worked for Exxon before, and
Yeah.
here's these projects you're going to be working on. So one of my first ones I got was a $10 million project that was from ground zero, and it was a top priority for the chemical plant I worked at. It's like, oh, this is a lot of pressure for newly
Yeah.
graduated, not know what I'm doing. Um, and I've got a boss that's a new boss, and we walk in, and she's like, "You're gonna have to start a project kickoff meeting." I was like, "I've never done a project kickoff meeting. What do I do?"
Yeah.
Never met anybody in this company before.
Yeah.
um,
So you kind of got thrown into it. Just kind of
yeah,
figure it out as you go.
yeah, yeah. That was a lot of it. No one gave me any like, "Here's how you do things." This is like, you got to figure it out. Just go
Hmm.
for it. I walked in that first kickoff meeting. I didn't have anything prepared. I didn't really know what the project was about. I didn't know the
Yeah.
unit. I knew nothing.
Yeah. So how did you like handle that? Did you embrace it? Were you like totally stressed? What was the like? How did that kind of affect you?
Yeah, I am kind of the person who doesn't quit. And,
Yeah,
um, I just kind of power through,
yeah,
and then I take charge if people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so when I got told it was the number one priority for our plant, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to talk to everybody I need to figure out what I'm doing and what I need to do. I had a great project team. They put like their most senior designers and the people they trusted most on the team. And so they were a lot of my mentors along the way and making sure I didn't fail.
mm-hmm.
But it also got me the opportunity to present even to like my boss's 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 boss and the people in
Yeah,
charge of the whole chemical company at ExxonMobil. And so
yeah,
I got a lot of recognition in my first year for just like pushing things along, and just kept going.
mm-hmm.
And it was one of the fastest projects they'd ever installed in ExxonMobil history. We got it from start to finish. We had the whole project designed and approved in 9 months, and then it was installed less than 6 months after that. So a year and a half from start to finish on $10 million of
Wow.
project. And they were profitable on it within 6 months after that. So
Yeah.
it was
Wow. So that's a lot to cram into the first year or year and a half.
yep, yep.
And so you were there for at Exxon for a couple years, right? 3, 4, 5 years,
Five.
something around there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 5 years. And Exxon's policy is that they move you every couple of years. So I stayed in that
Oh.
position as project manager for 1 year, and then they moved me on. And then after that, I went on to be what they call a synthetics operations engineer. And I was on the operating unit. I wore the hard hat. I wore the fire retardant clothing. I wore the steel-toed boots. I was out there working with the operators of the synthetic oil unit that makes Mobile One, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned all about how manufacturing works from an on the ground, boots in the field operation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really great experience. And after that, I went on to a role as capital budget coordinator for the entire chemical plant and managed their $40 million budget there.
Yeah. Wow. So this entire time over the course of these probably first couple years, did you have an idea of a career path of where you wanted to take all this, or is it like honestly, like most people, the first couple years is like I'm just figuring shit out. I don't know what exactly I want to do, but I just want to get this experience and see where it goes. Like, what did you have kind of any semblance of like a career path or trajectory in mind, or were you just kind of going with the flow?
Kind of going with the flow. There's like basic rules you have to check off to like gain experience, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was doing and getting the training underway to be able to advance within the corporation. And so I was doing all the right stuff, being on their path and doing what I wanted to do, and I loved working there. I loved the people I worked with, and I loved the challenges I was working on. It was just kind of interesting to see how
Mm-hmm.
things went, and it still would have been interesting to see where that career path would have taken me. My
Mm-hmm.
husband was very adamant he wanted to start his own company one day. So his dad had always talked about having his own company, and my husband's like, "I'm going to do it." But we can't like wait until it's too late when it's like we're 50 and it's like I dreamed of doing this in my entire life. I've never actually done it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and want to do it. And so it's like, all right, if we're going to do this, let's take the leap while we're young and we don't have kids, and let's go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he quit first and he started online advertising and e-commerce. And then about a year and a half later, I left Exxon to join him and see where those opportunities would take us.
Yeah. And that was going to be my next question is like, even though it was pretty early in your career, did you, my question is going to be, did you have that entrepreneurial thing pulling you to something? Or was it more of like just the idea of kind of you and your husband kind of doing something together, or what did that look like? Or did you actually, a better question is, did you have other people in your world, friends, family, whoever, that kind of were entrepreneurs in that way that you almost got to see them do it a little bit, even though if like you're on the outside and you're not exactly seeing the playbook of how they did it, but you're at least getting to see other people doing it. Did you have that at all?
Yeah, a bit. So yes, definitely my husband and his entrepreneurial dream, but my mom as well. So at 59 and a half, she started her own business, and she
Oh wow.
started a med spa here in Kansas City. And it was her first time owning a business, and like watching her go through that, and how she managed that, and also doing it late in life. Like I said, it's like waiting until a year later, it kind of feels like you missed your opportunity, but she was 59 and a half and she went ahead and did it, and she was very successful, and went on to sell that business later, and retire now. But that, just watching from the outside and watching her whole progress, is also very
Hmm.
inspiring.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So you and your husband were kind of jumping into some stuff together in that entrepreneurial world. What did that look like in
Yeah.
in the very beginning, in the early days? I'm sure it changed a lot, right, over time.
Yeah, it definitely did. So when we first got started, it was a lot of online advertising and making the creatives for someone else's business. We always knew like this was kind of like a learning stage of learning how to advertise for other people's products. We would eventually own our own.
Hmm.
Um, and so we are always looking at like what other products could we be launching. At one point, we were looking at pickleball rackets like 5 years before pickleball became huge.
Yeah.
Kicking ourselves. We should have done that.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the story of a lot of the things we looked at. We were either like 5 years too early, or just in the middle of the fad phase, and it's like
Hmm.
this is kind of fading. Then it's not something we're passionate about. So we always dabbled in a bunch of different opportunities and a bunch of different businesses. Some our own, some other people's, all over the place.
Yeah. So it was kind of the initial idea that you guys had, or the vision was to start by kind of doing work for other people, doing, online marketing, advertising. But the goal the whole time was to eventually kind of have your own product or your own, thing to go and promote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And a lot of the work we did was like products you launch on Amazon and have Amazon businesses, and see where that went. But
Hmm.
then we got to the one we were passionate about, which is Elm Dirt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to hear more about the kind of what got you there. Like, obviously, to launch a business like that, that's something that you are passionate about. But what was that journey? How did it look like, sort of arriving to that very first initial idea? Because again, like everything, it probably changes a lot, but kind of what was the spark?
Yeah, it's a lot obviously changed in the time from when I graduated college, 5 years at Exxon, and then we are 5 years in entrepreneurship when we started having children. And of course, children will also change your outlook on a lot of different things.
Oh yeah.
And so by the time I had my second child, we had a house with a backyard, and we obviously had 2 years under our belt with our first child, and we're just getting started with our second one. And she was a dedicated dirt eater. Like we tried not to have her eat dirt, and it's just like she could not get her to quit. And sometimes that's like it's a nutrient deficiency, but we had her tested and she's not nutrient deficient. She just liked eating dirt. And
Yeah.
maybe it was like my reaction she liked getting out of me, but we couldn't get her to quit. And just watching her in the backyard, just grabbing fistfuls of dirt and like eating it and touching it and playing with it. And it's like, I should feel safe in my own backyard, not watching you play with the fertilizer pellets or the weed killers or the pesticides that we just put down.
Yeah.
And not have to worry about that in other places as well. And we also have dogs, and it's like watching them run around in the yard and then lick their paws afterwards. It's like I need something that I feel safe in my own backyard and get those synthetic chemicals out of it. And so that's where the passion came from. And then it was kind of a meandering path as to how I came up with the solutions. So my
Hmm.
husband's family had a worm farmer back in the 1980s, and I'd heard of worm farming from them.
Mm.
And I wanted to do worm composting on a personal level, but watching my daughter do that, I knew more moms had to feel the same way I did. and more families. And I had to share it with more people. And so my original plan in 2020 was to sell at farmers markets. I had like sustainability meetings set up. And I was going to sell the composting worms and their poop, which is worm castings. And of course, 2020 had other plans for all of us.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since
And so all of this was happening like early 2020 or kind of late 2019 ish.
yeah, my daughter was born in 2019, and then January 2020 was when we bought our first worms and really took Elm Dirt off the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was not just like, oh, we've got this idea. You guys were kind of pursuing it, starting to try to make it happen.
Yes,
Yeah.
um, and since we've got the background in online sales, like as soon as the pandemic like hit, it was like, okay, well, let's wait for a minute and see what's going to happen, how long this is going to last, and see if those
Hmm.
like in-person meetings are going to happen. And of course, we all know how that turned out.
Oh
um,
yeah.
and so then we transitioned to online sales, and that's where we learned that worm castings and composting worms sell out in the nation every year, and it's very hard to keep up with demand unless you have the space to take
Mm.
care of a bunch of worms. And so that was kind of the next hurdle for us to face is how do we grow Elm Dirt?
Hmm. Yeah. And at this time, were you both full time working on this, or was there sort of a transition period from doing some of the other, work that you guys had?
Yeah. At that time, I was more full time mom than anything else because
Hmm.
obviously I had a 6 month old and
Yeah.
a 2.5 year old. They were keeping my hands very full, and my husband was working both on freelance advertising as well as working for an agency during 2020, which is a very up and down year for that industry as well.
Hmm.
He helped out when he could, but most of it was me working when the kids were napping or when
Yep.
they went to bed at night, and or getting the kids to put stickers in boxes or put stickers on boxes,
Hmm.
whatever I
Yeah.
could have them do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, so my next question is kind of like at that stage where you saw there was obviously a problem, that you guys had a solution, that there was, some, demand for, this product, this solution. What was the next step for you to like go and maybe it's around the time that you were figuring out, okay, we have to try to figure out how to make this an online business. Like, what was the first step to go identify the audience, figure out what the message was, what did that process look like for you
Yeah, well,
guys?
this was a lot about solving my own problems, which is a lot of my audience, right?
Hmm.
And it's not just moms, but it's also grandmas that garden, and anybody who likes getting their hands in the dirt can feel the same things that I do. Dads and grandpas as well, and pet parents.
Hmm.
um, and so that was kind of an easy way for us to communicate with our audience was, all right, you feel the same things I do, and this is why we're doing it, and this is how we're doing it, and just being able to tell our story continually, time and time again.
Hmm. And how did you start out to kind of did you do like a quick bit of, market research? Did you talk to people? Did you like, what did that part of it look like?
Yeah. So in the very beginning, in 2020, when we were doing worm castings and worms, it was a little bit of market research, like how do people sell worms first of all online?
Hmm.
And the answer is yes. And then where do they sell them? And but then from a lot of it, it was basically just go do. So we originally started as an Etsy store. So we're making the worm castings from our worms that we have in our own house because we
Hmm.
started in our house. Um,
Yeah.
and shipping them out ourselves, and that's where we learned that they sell out every year. Like we couldn't keep up. We continually saw our competitors sell out, and they couldn't keep up. And so then that that led down the road of like, how do we grow Elm Dirt? And what's the next step? And that was a lot more market research of what do we do to grow it, and how do we get there? And then also, where's our time going? Because at that point, I'm working on the home and keeping the kids, and on Elm Dirt, and doing so many things during nap times that
Mm-hmm.
are slowly dwindling. And then my husband's also working full time, and none of us have as much time as we wanted. And it's like, okay, if we're going to do Elm Dirt, we are going to have to do this and like commit to it. And so we went out and got some like friends and family investors and committed. And that's where we got our first warehouse. We bought a lot more worms, and we were going to expand our worm farming operations there. But the other thing that we were doing market research on was, how do we maximize the power of worm castings? Because if we can't keep up with demand, that means there's a lot more people out there that want it than can get it. And the other
Mm-hmm.
side is, what about the people who don't want to touch worms, composting worms, or deal with composting worms, and just want the easy solution?
Mm-hmm.
And the busy parents out there always want the easy solution.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and so that's where we started doing more research into organic fertilizer formulas, and how we can lead the industry in making those and making them as effective as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And was that something that you heard from customers, or something you just kind of figured out intuitively that there's, got to be a market for this because it just makes sense based on what you knew about that audience?
Yeah, a little bit of both. A lot of our innovation comes from our customers' responses and our customer relationships. People are always asking us for, have you thought about this? Have you tested this kind of product? And so there's always something in the works from our customers, which is great. But then it's also like what the market wants and needs, and then also what I personally would want and need, that my audience would personally want.
Mm-hmm.
And so that there is, it's really a trifold approach, because if I'm selling to my customers, it's something that I would want to use in my personal life,
Yeah.
and what I would want to share with my family and friends as well. But I also have to pay attention to what the market is and what it wants and what it needs as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing too, the early product that you were selling was, for a lot of people, especially if the demand was really high and supply was a little bit low, they're probably like repeat customers, right? Like repeat purchases, like just the nature of that product. I'm guessing that was apparent right away. Did you did you have problems with like knowing like, okay, we've got all these customers that, we've got a lot of potential of, you know, repeat business, but was there stuff kind of, more on the back end that was making it hard to serve those customers? Like, did you ever kind of go through that kind of a process of, kind of figuring out, okay, we've got this great audience. How do we make sure we're serving them?
Yeah, yeah. There's always so many problems on the back end that people don't see.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and I love my customers, and the gardening space is just so nice. Like, they're very willing to talk to you, and like, if you've got an issue, just tell them, and they're very much patient customers. So I
Hmm.
appreciate them so much. But on the back end, especially shipping worms, there's all sorts of problems, right? You ship them across the nation in all sorts of seasons. There's freezing in the winter, and there's really hot weather across the nation in the summer. And so the worms die a lot, like probably 25 to 50% of our worm shipments would die depending on the time of year, what weather patterns
Hmm.
were going. We did our best not to ship when there was a major one that we knew about, but you can't tell all the time.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was a big challenge of making sure we were getting reliable product to our customers that they would be happy with. And then the other side is, how can we make a better product for them that's easier to use, that's easy for them to share with other people, and make their lives better. And that's where those fertilizer formulas also came from. And when you're developing your fertilizer formulas, there is a lot of trial and error. So we did a lot of research, a lot of talking to scientists and horticulturalists and master gardeners and all sorts of people in the beginning. and our customers, right? We've already built a customer base at that point. And then we started with a 5-gallon bucket in our warehouse of making the product, and just putting it in bottles and seeing what would happen. And our products are live microbes plus nutrients. But when you're working with live microbes, they don't exactly behave the way you want them to. And so we had a lot of exploding bottles or just really bad smells and all sorts of stuff going on all the time back in.
Yeah. So how long would you say that trial and error period went on to kind of get you to more or less the formula that you ended up kind of sticking with?
Yeah. So we had probably a 6-month period before we even launched our first product on the fertilizer side. And then once we launched it, we still continued to have issues that our customers may or may not have been aware of on our side. And it probably took us another 2 years even after that point to be able to say we had a formula that's we were very happy with. And at that point, we knew we had something really unique too, because everybody kept telling us we couldn't do what we were doing. I always love that, because if you're telling me I can't do it and I'm doing it, that means I've got something that's special. And so we went ahead and patented our formulation on our fertilizer, because we're doing something that people told us we couldn't do.
Yeah. Now, were they saying that because of like an industry like that, where, there's like billion-dollar companies that, in terms of like the market, if you have a garden or a yard and you're looking for products, that I would assume that's just like a really hard like market to kind of crack into. Is that why they said it was impossible, or was it more, again, like the back end stuff of like getting something sort of somewhat proprietary and making it and selling it and scaling it? Was it just the mechanics of that, or was it the marketing, or was it both?
There's a lot into it. So the first step was live microbes in a bottle was something that people didn't think was possible unless you're like refrigerating it or doing it on a small scale. There's a lot of companies out there that are doing, they're called biologicals now, mostly on the agriculture sector. And those, they have issues with transport and like the shelf life, especially. And so a lot of it was like the actual product itself. Like you can't put microbes in a bottle and then have a 1-year shelf life. And like,
Gotcha.
well, we do. Okay. And there's definitely like the industry, right? The fertilizer industry is very closed. There is the big four on fertilizer, and everybody knows who the major ones are. And even on the direct to consumer side, there is the big players, and there's not really anybody else. And so breaking in and making a name from ground zero up is not easy.
Yeah. I'm sure, to say the least. So I just want to make sure I get sort of the timeline right. So by the time you were like full steam ahead, developing this product, working through all of those issues that you described, had you completely sort of like given up on like the worm side of the business, or was that something you were still doing? And like, how'd you kind of balance that?
Yeah, there's definitely an overlap in the middle. So 2021 to 2022 was a lot of like scaling up our fertilizer side and figuring out how the formula works and trial and error and figuring out how to store the product and how to make it all work. And we still had the worms. And so we were still selling worms. And at one point in 2022, we had like 10 employees. We're all trying to do stuff. We're hand filling bottles. We're all hand measuring worms, and it's a labor intensive process. And it's not easy to manage that many employees while you're still trying to like figure everything out. And so that there was a really big learning year for us. And then we realized we had to get automation going. And the other thing that happened in 2022 was we got approached to apply for a USDA grant for expanding sustainable US made fertilizer production,
Mm.
which really kind of catapulted our abilities to scale our technology and develop our formulations to the point where it is today.
Yeah, gotcha. And I'm kind of curious in that transition period. So obviously, because you're doing almost everything like on your own or part of a very small team,
Yeah.
you have all of the stuff of like figuring out the product side of the like the products, the business, the logistics, the technology, the innovation, the et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of in parallel, what did it look like from a like just a marketing and branding perspective? I mean, were you what were you kind of focused on at that time? What was working well for you? Was it I mean, I would imagine because like the you said the kind of gardening like community and that audience and people who love their lawn. I mean, it's probably pretty easy to kind of build a little bit of an audience, within that market. And I'm guessing you probably had like an email list and you probably did stuff on social, but like what were you kind of focused on? What was working for you during that time?
Yeah, we were doing a lot of also trial and error on the marketing side. So we develop all of our content basically in house, but we've worked with a number of agencies and freelancers across the way. But mainly, it's my husband in the background doing a lot of our online advertising, including our emails and all of that stuff. And it's figuring out how to communicate with the customers and how what phrasing resonates with them, what videos resonate with them, and really developing kind of those raving fans. Because as we know, if you're a raving fan, you share it with somebody and you want to tell more
Mm-hmm.
people. And that's been a lot of our success is people love hearing our story and they want to be a part of it and they want to support us in some way. And that was a lot of the focus and a lot of trial and error to figure out that focus in that time period as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, was there a like platform that you guys spent most of your time on? I mean, because obviously there's advertising, and that can be Facebook or Meta, Google, whatever it might be. But in terms of like building a more like organic like audience on a platform somewhere, where were you kind of spending most of your time? Because that's where I'm guessing that's where probably a lot of the that trial and error that you talk about is like testing kind of different messaging, different ways of kind of reaching your audience.
Yeah.
What was there one platform that you guys were more invested in, or were you kind of uh, spreading it out and doing more, honestly, more testing across a bunch of platforms?
Yeah, we our bread and butter's always been Meta. That was where we'd had some experience before, and then it's also where a lot of our audience stays. So we do work with a lot of grandmas that are gardening, and they tend to be on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
that tends to be where our audience is. But we have a large email list that we've built on the back end that we're regularly communicating with and sending out newsletters and updates and sharing planting information with as well. And of course, we're always testing other stuff. Like we've definitely dabbled in Google. Amazon is a space where we are,
Mm-hmm.
but we've dabbled in running Amazon advertising and like working more with Amazon. But our bread and butter's always been Meta,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's everything we've done has gotten a little more sophisticated over the years too. And so we've got like a school community now where we talk to our customers a lot about how they're growing plants and they ask questions because that tends to be a lot of our customer questions is how do I grow this? What do I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
What do I do with this tree that I've had for 50 years and now it's got an issue or something?
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
not experts in that, but let's create a community where we can all discuss it together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense for that audience. The house that I've been in this house where I live now for like 3 years, but it feels like I just moved here and figuring out like I was in the city, I was in Chicago in a condo and then moved and I was like, oh shoot, I have a yard. I have to take care of it now. And I have uh, plants and flowers from the previous owner. I don't want them to die. I don't know anything about this. And so uh, uh, just Googling stuff really quickly sort of led me like very quickly to like Facebook groups for like specific communities, like where we live or nearby like neighborhoods. And yeah, the amount of activity and engagement and like how hardcore those folks are that are in those groups. Because I think you're right. That's where people go when they have a question and they're going to ask a question of a group or a community like that. So I'm guessing for you guys, just figuring out how to just be more visible to those people, one, or more getting plugged in to the actual process, I'm sure was kind of the goal, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, better ways that we can communicate with people. I like you saw. There's so many communities out there for gardening and like how do I do this, and that's all people want is to like connect. And that's what we see a lot in our customers too, in the
Mm-hmm.
gardening and home care space is they want to talk to real people who aren't trying to sell them something that can help them with their problems. And it's a great space to just connect with other people on something that's not controversial
Mm-hmm.
and brings joy to people, whatever your affiliations or whatever you do on the other ends of your life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And can you think, kind of putting you on the spot? Can you think of like a really specific example of some something that you saw, in one of these gardening community group, Facebook groups, or maybe a customer that you talked to directly that was just like a really specific thing that you saw or part of a conversation you were in, and just kind of the light bulb went off to either, okay, maybe this is how we make the marketing a little bit more tailored for this group, or maybe this is some product feature eventually we can think about adding. Like, because clients that I work with in my consulting work, I think, 9 times out of 10, I think some of the best ideas are just like get on the phone with your customers, even if it feels weird that you're calling them or emailing them or interviewing them, whatever it might be. It feels odd. It feels weird, but sometimes you get some of the best like little anecdotal kind of nuggets that turn into ideas that you end up using later on. Um, so I was just kind of curious. I've been rambling a little bit to give you a chance to think of what that might be. But did you ever have one of those examples?
Yeah, we get so many. That's it's kind of fun along the way, but I've got a couple of specific examples.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always also reading through our customer comments on like our ads or even our posts to just hear what our customers are saying. The one in particular, customer, he's here in town with me in Kansas City, and he's a rose gardener. And he's been gardening with his roses for over 40 years. And originally he came to me because he had a problem. He got his roses got sprayed with weed killer by accident from an overspray by wind just
Mm.
blowing from his neighbor's yard. And he was worried about his roses. So I helped him build up those roses and get them back to healthy. But his problem has also been that he's a championship rose grower, so he's got very specifics on like what his roses can look like. And when you've got like Japanese beetles, per se, that love roses to munch on, and they'll eat the leaves, he can't have that in his championship roses. And so some of what we were looking at was natural ways of pesticide and how we can come up with a better solution. And we've got a couple pesticides out there, but none I say that fixes his problem that looks really great for championship roses. And so
Mm-hmm.
that one's still in the works, but we do have some solutions for other people. And then another customer we had is actually a retail store, and they were like, oh, I get customers in here coming all the time about natural ways to make their leaves shiny and to get rid of the hot water spots. And we as a store would really love to get rid of hard water spots as well and tell them that it's a natural solution. And so that's where our plant perfection came from, was an all natural plant shine that the retail stores were asking for. And it's been really helpful for them to be able to get the leaves really looking nice for customers. And then the customers can also use it to, get the dust off at home. It helps their plants breathe easier. And so I use it in my home too. But I never even considered using a plant shine before the retail store came in and talked to us.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how sometimes those conversations happen, or you're looking at comments on a post, and then, I mean, it truly is a light bulb moment, because like it almost seems obvious once you start thinking about it. But, before you saw that thing from, XYZ customer, it just kind of wasn't on the radar until that happens. So I love asking that question, just because, for people in different industries, the exact same, kind of process that you went through might help them, kind of uncover some new insight that, maybe they otherwise wouldn't have found. So that it's just like that process, I think, is so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone should be paying attention to what their customers saying, or even not saying, and what their pain points are. That's our favorite question to ask customers, is like, what's your problem? Like, what can I help you solve? And usually they'll start talking about something, and you just keep asking that question, and they'll tell you about something else. And it's like, oh, I can actually help you there.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, for me, sometimes those really great customer insights might not necessarily change the product. It might not change much about the business, but in terms of the marketing and the messaging, sometimes I think businesses can go a very, very long time with, the answer to the question is like, okay, what problem are you solving for your customers? And you might have an answer. It's a good answer, and it works, and it might work for a long time. But then at some point, some companies maybe start to realize, oh, shoot, I think the problem that we're actually solving is just a slightly different articulation of what we had. And so, but the answer is it technically is different. And then when they start to do some of the testing around, the messaging, they realize, oh, this is a much better way to kind of, rise above all the noise. If there's lots of other companies offering the same thing, or it's just 10% too generic, and then we just need to get a little bit more specific. Sometimes that makes all the difference, which is a big puzzle sometimes. But it's one that I love. I'm actually curious if that's stuff that you get into also, or I mean, your husband obviously a lot of marketing background, so maybe it's both of you. Kind of curious if that's the kind of thing that you just kind of like roll your eyes and go, okay, it's just part of running a business, or if you actually really like the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's probably more of our recent stuff we've been working on. Now that our products have been kind of more set, it's been a lot of like, how can we better reach our customers or communicate with customers the best, because not everybody hangs out in the gardening groups online. Also, a lot of those gardening groups don't let you promote products, so it's not a great place to really meet new customers. And so it's how do we communicate better with customers? What's resonating with them? And what problems and pain points can we solve? And so a lot of what we talked about previously in a lot of our advertisements was the science. The science is what really sets us apart of how our products work, but that doesn't work with every customer. Not everybody cares about the fact that there's microbes in our products, and so they're really cool and they do all these cool stuff. But and then it's, how do we say that we are this really cool product without being sciencey, and how do we say it in a way that makes us sound different from our competitors as well? Because they're all trying to say we're natural and organic and we work really well and we do all these great things. And you can't just say the same things and stand out. And so it's a big challenge to reach the customers in the right way. And I think it's something we're still working on, and will always be working on, because when the second we release an ad, our competitors are copying it. We had one day we released, and not a week later we had literally almost the exact same on a competitor's ad, and we're like, they copied that. I can tell exactly where that came from.
Yeah, and that a lot of that too, like what you're talking about a second ago, figuring out, how much of the science do we talk about? How much of like just the end result, the outcome do you talk about? What are the differentiators? I've had clients that are in kind of similar positions where there's something like really specific, really concrete. Maybe it's the science behind it or the technology or the code that they use. Who knows what it was, but like that is like a big differentiator. But then there's this like really interesting process where you go through to figure out, okay, is it a differentiator? Yes or no? Okay, how big of a differentiator is it? Because it might be similar enough to like what a lot of other companies can say where, you don't want to like completely, put all your eggs in that basket. And then the other interesting thing too is that I come across all the time, and I'm sure you guys run into this all the time also, is like, are the differentiators the thing that the customers actually care about? Is it the thing that they're going to get really excited about? Because if it's not, then maybe it's the more secondary thing you talk about, or even like the third level down of what you talk about. And that's I'm sure what you talked about earlier about all the testing and the tinkering and the playing around with like the different messaging. I mean, that's again the kind of infuriating, frustrating part about the whole process. But sometimes when you do start to figure it out, that's where it feels like very rewarding that you like, kind of we're slogging through that whole process to, come out the other end with something that kind of works well. That some good evidence of that is like if people are copying it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's probably the hardest part of marketing is finding that little like short 4 or 5 word description that sets you apart and communicates to your customers what you do. Because that's everything to how you
Mm-hmm.
communicate to your customers. And we've got the added challenge. We started online and we've done all this work online, and that's where our expertise lies. But fertilizer is mainly sold in stores, and we've never worked with retail stores until this company. And so we had to learn real fast what is important to retail stores and what is important to shelves, and how do you sell a product on a shelf? Because online you have
Yeah.
all these big videos and landing pages where you can describe your product and tell your product, and people will go and they'll look at your reviews and compare it to other things. But in a store, you've got a very short window where they're just going to look at the bottle and be like, I'm going to buy this or I'm not. And it doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what else is online, right?
Yep.
And so figuring out those words that communicate to the customer instantaneously what you are and why you're different and what your product does is a huge benefit in that world and a very big challenge. But it also translates to the online world as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you find yourselves kind of struggling, or maybe not struggling, but just realizing that it's this whole separate form of marketing when it's like sort of like the B to B to C, where like now you're marketing to partners, to, stores, retail locations, like places where people eventually you want them to find your product, but there's this whole other step of marketing to sort of proved that your product belongs in those locations. Have you guys been doing that kind of all along the way? I mean, that's something that never really ends, but how did you guys sort of tackle that? Or is it like what a lot of entrepreneurs are, where it's like we're just going to like figure it out as we go?
Yeah, a lot of it's figuring it out as we go. And we've got the added challenge where so we're talking direct to consumers mainly. I mean, that's where we started.
Yeah.
Retailers are a natural progression of that because they're selling direct to consumers, and it's easier for someone to go buy it in a store. And so, what they care about is a lot of what we care about. How do we best communicate directly to a consumer? And then the added side is our B2B side, because we work with landscapers and farmers and all sorts of different groups where we're bulk selling our products to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the more the people we sell our products to, the more part of the world we can change and touch and help improve their environment and their health and all sorts of different things. but the communication to all those different groups is very hard.
Yeah.
um, and like a lot of the B2B side is very relationship based and a very different feel and a very different discussion, and something we're still learning and working on. And then the retail side, we're working on that as well. It's very different than
Mm-hmm.
online sales, like I mentioned. And so figuring out how those retailers work, I think is a faster process than our B2B side,
Yeah.
but it's all in the works and it's all trial and error and figure it out as we
Mm-hmm.
go.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, and I've asked this question to pretty much everybody that I've talked to so far, and the answer is uh, almost always like, well, yeah, of course I felt that way. But like, was there a moment, or maybe it was like really early on, or maybe it was when there's like a big critical moment where you guys had to, kind of pivot or make some big decisions. Like, did you have moments where you're like, oh shit, I don't know if this is going to work? Like where you just kind of uh, struggle with, just maybe it's just being overwhelmed from running every aspect of the business. Maybe it's mostly that, but did you have those sort of fears of like, oh man, I don't know if this is going to work out
Yeah, like all the time.
all the time? And that's why I said like pretty much every answer has been like, that's like such an obvious question. Of course we feel that way.
Yeah. I think there's always something when you own your own business. There's like I was telling something the other day. It's like you could be on top of the world one day, and the next day it feels like everything is failing, and you're gonna lose it all. And the next day
Yeah.
could be like I'm on top of the world again. Everything's going
Yep.
great. And it swings so fast. We've had so many moments where we have to make a decision and go with it, to continue what we're doing. Again, we're very passionate about what we do, so that drives a lot of what we do. And I have the personality that just doesn't quit. Like I
Yep.
just got to keep going. But one of our specific stories was a couple of years ago. We were doing everything right. We had the 10 plus person team that was doing all the manual filling and manual everything. We were fulfilling the orders ourselves. We were making the products ourselves. We were raising the worms ourselves. And it was too much. Like we just never felt like we had enough time to fully do everything well. And so it was always a continuous madhouse of like, oh, this is going wrong. Like all hands on deck over here, but yet we dropped the ball on something else
Mm-hmm.
because we're all over here focused on this problem. I was like, we got to get rid of something. And so we decided to outsource our fulfillment, um, and that went absolutely terribly. And so we went online and we found a fulfillment company. We'd gotten a personal recommendation from somebody we knew and trusted, for a fulfillment company, and we were all very excited about being able to outsource that and be able to
Yeah.
focus on the things we wanted. And they couldn't do it. And they just dropped the ball continually. Um, we worked with them for like 5 months, like torture.
Yeah.
And in the end, they ended up like committing fraud against us too, because they tried to
Oh.
bill us for a lot of packages that we sent out ourselves. And it was just this major catastrophe. But it was a very good learning experience because we learned what to ask a fulfillment company.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3 months into the process, we knew we needed another one. So the last 2 months was really just a transition phase. And it was interviewing new fulfillment companies and asking the right questions, and figuring out what we needed to trust in a company after
Mm-hmm.
that catastrophe, instead of just trying to bring it back into house. And the
Yeah.
next company was fantastic. We still work with them today, and they've been night and day difference from the first one. But sometimes you just have to take that leap and fail,
Yeah.
and then you know the right way to go about it the next time.
Yeah, no, I mean that's all you can do. Like if you have something that works out really well, sometimes you kind of have to remind yourself of, a big win or the right decision. You kind of backtrack and go, okay, there were a couple not so great situations that kind of led us down that path. So you take the good, the bad. It's all part of the roller coaster.
Yeah.
But my next question is kind of like the other side of that coin. it, one of the more positive things. What are you kind of like most excited about today, of where the business is going, or something with your products, or something that you're doing to grow, on the marketing side, or just on, anywhere within the business? What are you kind of excited about?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to be excited about. So I
Yeah.
mentioned our USDA grants that we got back in 2023, which we just finished up last year, right before the election. And so we bought all new equipment. We reformatted our entire warehouse. We also reworked how we manufacture. So it's a much easier, simpler, faster process and very scalable. And now that we're to that point, it feels like our manufacturing is like set for a big opportunity. And so this next phase of what we're doing is a lot of that marketing, trial and error. The same things we did on the manufacturing side, we're doing on the marketing side,
Hmm.
and figuring out how to best do that in a new way. And that's, I mean, we've been on Meta since the beginning, and so it's figuring out other things besides Meta, and how we can better do even like public relations, work with reporters, and get our name out there in ways that people aren't just like kind of numb to. I'd say
Hmm.
am
Yeah.
I am one of those people. So this is again me solving my own problems here.
Yeah.
I don't click on too many ads on Meta. And so it's like, how do I shop? And some of it's influencers, and some of it's reading reviews in like trusted newspapers or whatever online digital source that I can and outreach
Hmm.
to, which is not something we've done before. So again, a lot of trial and error there.
Yeah.
And then also, how do we set ourselves apart from our competitors that are also trying to do all the same stuff? And so we've got some like university studies in place to study our products to be able to lend more credibility to what we're actually doing, besides, the hundreds of thousands of customers that have given us 5-star reviews.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you have the great reviews, and you've got all the customers, and you've got some really good science, and very tangible, credible stuff to point to, like that, seems like, that is a very good recipe to stand out from some of the competitors that might not have that already. So, um, and are the other question I had about, like, kind of looking forward, are there new audiences that you're looking to kind of connect with in the future, or figure out how to serve? Because I forgot to ask this earlier, but it seems like you have obviously like really hardcore, garden lawn enthusiasts. Um, it's probably a lot harder to like reach some of the more uh, casual gardening, maybe not enthusiasts, but people who are a little bit more casual about it. They might just not be the right audience, and they wouldn't be the folks who are going to come back and keep buying. But like outside of that, are there like other like new audiences that you want to eventually reach, or is it the kind of thing of there's a big enough core audience that it's all about, just kind of winning a little bit more market share there?
Yeah, there's a lot of different audiences. I mean, I love our casual gardeners too. Some of them aren't necessarily so interested in organic gardening, but I'm happy to work with whoever is interested in natural and
Yeah.
organic ways. But the bigger side is those that are interested in environmental things. So one of our university studies this year is going to be looking at nitrogen runoff and how we can best fix that issue with our products. And not only just by substituting synthetic fertilizer, but working in conjunction with synthetic fertilizer, which is a huge win for especially states like Florida that have red tide issues that are affecting their tourist industry, and working with cities on how we can cut down on their wastewater costs because of their nitrogen that's getting into their wastewater from the fertilizer they're using. Um, and so we see huge opportunities in places we haven't necessarily touched there with landscapers and cities, even sporting venues like golf courses, um, soccer stadiums, football stadiums, all of those we've talked to a few, but it's not something really even open the door. I mean, like I've mentioned a couple of times, is every new customer segment requires a different communication method and different ways of talking, and then even different lingos.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
um, it's very hard to get up to speed on all those things, but we are a solution that fits in so many different buckets and are what people are looking for. And the sky's the limit there. It's just how much are we willing to work on at any one point in time, and so we have to say no to certain segments at this point just because we aren't ready to learn all the stuff we
Yeah.
have to learn to be able to make those sales. But in the future, one day, we hope to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's kind of going in too many directions at once. Again, from a business, very practical standpoint, it's challenging, different to have the time to like serve those markets. But then on the marketing side too, like without a really, really solid plan for how you're going to do that and do it well and not kind of, spread all your efforts across, too many different, audiences where you're not quite ready to do that. It can be kind of disastrous. So it's very good that you have all those, opportunities and stuff on the horizon, but, tackling them in the right order, I'm sure is definitely the smart approach.
Yeah, yeah.
So one kind of final question for you. I ask everybody this because I love talking to entrepreneurs and founders and people who are sort of in the trenches, so to speak. And you obviously have two little kids. Both you and your husband are kind of running this business. But what do you do just to kind of unwind, unplug, step away from the chaos of just running a business and kind of turn off your brain, or what do you do to kind of just get away from it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I think the short answer that I get every time is I'm still figuring it out. I have no idea. But a lot of people do have stuff that they like to do. I mean, it could just be family stuff. Could be, who knows? But I am curious because it is something that everybody struggles with. So,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out if anybody has cracked that code a little bit. I love hearing about it.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. I'm an avid reader, so I'm always reading something. I try and read at least 4 or 5 books a month, and that's one of the ways that I unwind at night, besides watching TV like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And then the other side is I'm very big into my own health and wellness, and so I'm always doing some sort of exercise or like looking up new recipes or something that I can do to help myself like personally. And some of it's a drive of I have so much on my plate that I have to be able to be on all the time. Because
Yeah.
whether I'm working, if I'm not working, I'm with my kids, and if I'm not doing that, I'm probably asleep. So kind of like optimizing myself to just be able to keep up with everything I'm doing. And so I'm always looking at how can I do more on like my health just to keep going.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's a very consistent answer. I think anybody running a business kind of can relate to that. That it's like, what do you do with your extra time? Like, what extra time? Like,
Yeah,
I don't think that's a real thing anymore.
I think back to the days when I was an engineer, straight out of school, and you don't have kids, and you come home at night and on the weekends, and I'm like, I don't know what I did with myself during that time. Like, I remember taking naps on like Sunday afternoon, and I'm like, God, if I had time to like nap on a Sunday afternoon now, it would be ridiculously great, but I don't think I could.
Yeah. Yeah. I have two little kids as well. And the weekend nap that's a pretty foreign concept at this point.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I appreciate it, Lauren, for sitting and chatting. Loved hearing about the business, your story, kind of where where you guys are taking the business. So yeah, much appreciated. It's been great sitting down and chatting.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Dan. It's been great chatting with you too. And thank you for having me.
Yep. and continued success. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.